Hello, it's Torte de Lini. These patches keep coming out really early before I can throw on my makeup, so I apologize for how I look. Nonetheless, patch 7.36a is out. Let's break it down real quick. We can already see Eternal Shroud has a slightly lower base magic resistance. That's one to lower its value versus the cost. The cost is much lower than Hard Tarrasque, even though Hard Tarrasque is probably equivalent, if not a little bit better, despite the almost double in price. So to see Eternal Shroud get nerfed again, completely understandable. If we scroll down here, we see Abaddon has his Mephitic Shroud, Aphotic Shield change from 180 to 170. And I think we're going to see this a lot for a lot of heroes where depending on which facet you take, the different values of the abilities will change. And I think that's going to be a little bit hard for everybody to kind of keep track of and to be aware, but hopefully it does lead to better balances in terms of facets. Aphotic Shield absorbs more damage and reflects back. So it's understandable that you can basically do better with the Mephitic Shroud. However, to say that its based shield has been reduced is not a bad change whatsoever. They also reduced the absorption amount from 80 to 75%. The overall preference between Mephitic Shroud over the Quickening was just clear cut, pretty much. You would always kind of choose this one. It just served its purpose much better, especially if you were a support hero versus the Quickening. Seemed like it was kind of cool idea, especially if you're a carrier, but ultimately just didn't really have as much appeal and value, especially when you're limited mostly by your mana. So we keep going through this list. Ancient Apparition, nothing really too much to talk about. Chilling Touch was one of the few spammable abilities you would use during the laning stage. I think honestly, early game, having 2 stacks of Death Rhyme Chilling Touch didn't matter that much since you only got 1 point Chilling Touch anyway. Late game, though, especially if you got the Aghanim Scepter on each apparition, you're looking at a pretty insane number of Chilling Touch stacks since every attack is 2. To see that change now is kind of a no biggie. This Arc Warden change is not that surprising at all. If you played Arc Warden at all in the previous days, the moment you're caught out, taking 75% was pretty brutal. You pretty much almost instantly or guaranteed lost your Arc Warden, even with the safety of your bubble or magnetic, whatever. So the Tempest Double taking a little bit less damage sounds good to me. One of the big updates, Axe. Axe is probably one of the best top 10 heroes to play in 7.36. Now to see that not only has he been fixed, but more importantly, he's taking a little bit less scaling value per kills and per level means that things are a little more fair for everyone else who's playing against this hero. So now he has a new ability called Coat of Blood. Now levels with Culling Blade, armor gain per kill reduced from 1 to 0.4, 0.6, 0.8 to 1.0. So basically, they're basically telling you that the previous values that they had, where every time you got a kill outside of Culling Blade was 1 armor, and every time you got a kill with Culling Blade it was 2 armor, they realized that that's maybe a little too strong, and it was very strong. You were pretty much guaranteeing kills pretty crazily, and so now they made it a little bit more scaling where, yes, you get a little bit of armor per kill, but obviously that value in armor is only good when you finally get levels in Culling Blade. You still get 2x per Culling Blade kill, except now you need to definitely get more levels in order to guarantee better armor levels. One man army strength increase reduced from 60 to 50% of Axe's armor. This is again another scaling value. It's just basically Axe coming from the mid to late game after a lot of success getting quick kills with his Culling Blade or his countering Helix is now a little more fair to deal with. Definitely a welcome change. I think Axe was probably one of the strongest heroes to play and really annoying to deal with. Basically everything just scaled massively early game with Axe and armor. Okay, another unsurprising change. Batrider, again, another top 10 hero that was just unbelievably annoying to deal against. They made Smoldering Resin, which if you don't know is essentially what happens when you attack with Batrider. It does 15% of its attack damage for every second for 2 seconds. So it used to work on wards and couriers. It also works on towers. Obviously, wards and couriers no longer are an issue. It used to be like if a Batrider caught your ward, that was it. You were basically unable to stop it, or at least deny it for the XP or gold. For Stoked, Now scales with Flaming Lasso. So again, this is another change similar to Axe, where you just had insane value right from the get-go in terms of movement speed and spell application. You had it from level 1. It was pretty insane. Stoked you pretty much used to initiate with Flame Break at the beginning of the laning stage for pause 4, for example, and then you would be able to use Firefly to then stay on top of your enemy and just or your target and pretty much guaranteed kill them with the amount of spell amp that you were dealing. Now it's going to work with Flaming Lasso, so it's a little more fair until the late game, where post Flaming Lasso, your spell amp and your movement speed can help you bring back enemies towards your team, and more importantly, do a lot of damage while you're Flaming Lasso dealing damage to them. Chen, small change. Chen is all about early to mid game, so to see that the creep health is contingent on Chen's level, just the same, but now it's just a tiny bit more health. It's just a nice change early game. So Crystal Maiden, again, another top 10 hero to play. Crystal Maiden mostly was playing with the Frozen Expanse facet. I think most people did not really care about Cold Comfort. I personally thought Cold Comfort was pretty good, but quite frankly, unless you're this close to Crystal Maiden, didn't really have much value. So again, they changed it. So now Crystal Maiden Frozen Expanse, which gives additional range and additional AoE bonus, is now built around Freezing Field. So scales obviously it's much slower than if you had scaled it with Arcane Aura, and then more importantly, it gives a lot of value early on regarding your first level, and then later on at the final levels, it's pretty much the same. So again, another hero that just gave a lot too early, too well. This one's a no-brainer. Dark Willow is another top 10 great hero to play. Both the innate talent or innate ability, as well as the Thorny Thicket facet were just too good, honestly. With the Pixie Dust here, you can pretty much use your Shadow Realm whenever you needed additional mana. It meant that you didn't have to go Arcane Boots anymore. You could just go straight into Tranquil Boots, and that means you get your Yules earlier, and then that also amplifies your 100% mana regen since it scales together. As for the facet Thorn Thicket, it previously gave Spell Amp, but they took that away because, again, it was just too good, too much value for what I would consider a very convenient facet that came literally at the start of the game. A lot of these facets, they come at the start of the game, and it actually is a little too pervasive in terms of value to justify keeping them as they are. For Death Prophet, though, Death Prophet's actually been one of the forgotten heroes this patch. She's not really that desirable versus some other guys. There are just a lot of heroes that do great tower pushing and overall really take advantage of their early to mid game, where Death Prophet kind of fell to the wayside despite an interesting innate talent or innate ability and facet. So now a Spirit Collector is going to be globally capturing any souls that die versus 2000 range. That makes it a little bit easier to play her regardless if you're involved or not, especially if the side lane's doing very well or the mid lane's doing very well and you're off in the off lane. As for the suppressed silence movement, slow increase from 10, 15, 20, 25. It's just a scaling adjustment because honestly 10% movement speed slow is negligible. I'm not really thinking about it, especially at the point when you get silence, which is level 8 or so. So nice change. All right, one of the big losers of this patch, Disruptor. Honestly, the changes they're making here with the formation delay reduced from 0.75 to 0.4 is a nice change. Makes it a little bit easier to land kinetic fence, where it could be more reactive rather than planned with your traditional circle kinetic field. Overall, I think most people were keeping it kinetic field, but kinetic fence could have its value as a whole, especially now that it could be casted a lot earlier to be more reactive and, more importantly, couch enemies from going the wrong way. So the takeaway with Dragonite's facets is that it sucks. I mean, the bottom line is that, you have basically 3 facets. You can either choose the fire one, which is splash, which is what most pub players choose. You could choose the corrosive one, which is early push, so you have a lot of early game value. Or you could choose frost dragon, which is, I think, the more preferred one by pros. I didn't get a good look yet. This is generally the more desirable one just because it has more late game value. Your early to mid game obviously lasts a lot shorter than your late game. So frost dragon is definitely the preferred one. However, I see they made it just a little bit easier in terms of corrosive dragon damage per second. They made it so it's not so easy to push with it. And then fire dragon cleave increased a little bit more, just so you can farm a little bit easier from the early game onward. I would consider Dragonite pretty much nerfed compared to previous patch, and not that great to play. So this is a nice touch with Earth Spirit. Now stepping stones, the facet. Basically, instead of you having like a collection of stones, now it's on a small cooldown that you can just use every so often. What's really nice is that with ending Roly Boulder, one, it no longer gets destroyed when you use it, and two, there's a new stone remnant spawning when you roll. So we'll just do that, and then boom, look at that. So if I'm gonna just do another roll, I could do this, boom. And so what's really nice is that you can effectively just have use this to initiate, get a stone immediately as a follow through, and then use your other abilities, which makes it really nice to play this hero just in general. Boom, etc., etc. You get my point. Nice changes, and there's no mana cost as well, because I think it's a little bit expensive for a hero that's supposed to play with a lot of stones to now have to have a small mana cost to deter him from being able to actually play with those few stones that he gets. Nothing really to say about Elder Titan. I'm not going to really talk about it that much. As for Enchantress, the Nature's Attendance duration increased from 9, 10, 11, 12 to 10, 11, 12, 13. I don't think there's really much to say about that. It's just a small adjustment. For Gyrocopter, I see they changed the Afterburner Rocket Barrage movement speed only increased by hitting heroes. Before, it just increased, and it was actually pretty insane. I don't really understand how on earth this went through. But basically, you would just pop Rocket Barrage Afterburner, you use that to close the gap, and then because the cooldown was so short, you can then use it again to actually kill the heroes, and it was actually pretty hilarious. Cool. Let's talk about our friend Huskar. Huskar mana change, basically having no mana now. It's one of his innate talents. He basically has no mana. Everything costs health. I think it's really nice. The problem is that you always found yourself at least about 30 to 40 to 50% health, especially when you have an armlet on and you had to use a variety of different abilities, especially early game if you're using your inner fire early game to help with last hits on range creeps or the guaranteed last hits. It would actually significantly hurt you down the road. To have Berserker's Blood actually increase in attack speed just a tiny bit makes it a little more alleviating, but I think what really matters here is the base armor being increased by 1, where yes, you're going to have lower health. Yes, you're going to have to prioritize maybe maxing Berserker's Blood or at least getting another point in it, but at least the harassment, the physical harassment damage you'll be taking is a little less weakened, because you're not picking up armor until after boost of speed. So you're going triple gauntlet into boost of speed into Helm of the Iron Will into then armlet. So to see that now we have a little bit more armor on Huskar, it makes it a little more sustainable for the hero. So the next change here is Juggernaut. I think most of these changes don't really matter all that much. I think the thing that matters the most is the mana cost increasing for Swift Slash. Makes it a little bit harder to just spam that every time it's all cooldown. If you manage to get 2 or 3 off during a fight. And then the cast range being a little bit harder to pull off Swift Slash if you don't have Blink Dagger to jump in. You can see it's almost a little bit more than Omni Slash is 350 range. This is 450 range. It used to be 550. It used to be really easy to pull it off, and then you could follow up with an immediate Omni Slash right after. As for Blade Form, most people were picking Blade Form here. Most people were picking, Blade Storm, but Blade Form Facet, it's just also very good, or was very good at the time before 7.68a. And effectively what essentially is happening here is that the linger duration reduced from 3 seconds to 2 seconds. Basically what would happen is if you take any damage while you're having this blade form stacks grow, which is maximum 10, then it would linger for about 3 seconds. Now it's 2 seconds. The 3 seconds was pretty much the full duration of Omni Slash at level 1. So major early game Omni Slash is just pretty much more potent and much more annoying to handle for anyone who came in contact with Juggernaut and tried to interrupt his farm. Now that it lasts only 2 seconds if you take any damage, it means you have to be very keen about relying on Blink to jump in and then popping your Omni Slash so you can still maximize the value of Blade Form. The IG per stack reduced from 3% to 2% is just a late game adjustment where Juggernaut still has incredible good agi gain. He would still get a butterfly, and then he would just still do pretty incredible damage with Blade Form. So nice change to make the hero a little more within the realm of mortality. Okay, big one here. Legion Commander Stonehold Plate damage to barrier reduced from 100% to 50%. If you don't know anything about Stonehold Plate, it was pretty much the reason why Legion Commander was the #1 best hero in the game for 7.68. Stonehold Plate damage to barrier being reduced from 100 to 50% is a really huge change. I think it brings Legion Commander a lot more closer to normality. I think like two heroes and some creeps gave you like 300 health barrier in the lane. It was pretty much impossible to stop the hero, and games would pretty much end 30 to 35 minutes maybe, just because Legion Commander had dominated so hard in the early game, and then in the mid or late game, instead of getting a Black King bar, she would pick up an Aghanim Scepter, which if you don't remember, gave you pretty much a free BKB that never diminished in value, right? If a BKB starts at 6 seconds and every time you use it, it goes 5, 4, 3, 2, whatever, or I think it stops at 4, this Aghanim Scepter gives you basically debuff immunity similar to BKB, and it lasts for 6 seconds, and it goes all the way up to 7.5, and that never is reduced. Granted, you can't use it outside of duel, but in general, what you're using is duel to catch someone out, duel them either to death or to hold them so that the rest of the team can kill that person or kill that enemy hero. And then after that, you're playing a 4v5 situation with a hero that does insane damage, typically as Legion Commander. So having the Ag Scepter still there and just Stonehold Plate being a little less pervasive in the early game is a nice change. I can see also they changed Aghanim Scepter cooldown to be reduced from -20 seconds to -10 seconds. This is just so you can't spam duel as much and basically get insane amount of damage after having such a strong lead in the early game. So yeah, nice change. Okay, nice change for Leshrac. Leshrac, since the Sanj Kaya changed, that no longer gives status resistance as far as I recall. It's kind of been a little bit harder for Leshrac into the late game, but early game Leshrac pretty much 0 mana problems. Now that they changed it to that your Facet Chronoptic Nourishment has a 50% penalty when attacking creeps, means that farming Leshrac to get your core items is a little bit harder, or rather not as comfortable in terms of mana. So it's a nice change for sure. It also makes laning against Leshrac a little more feasible for a lot of enemies. So again, another really nice change to make the hero a bit more suffered in the early game in terms of mana. Lifesteal being one of the best heroes in the previous patch, and now kind of falling to the wayside in terms of value. I see they did try to make his Unfettered Facet a little bit better. If you don't know what Unfettered is, it's just basically a replacement for your Rage. Instead of Rage giving you debuff immunity plus movement speed, this one gave you magic and status resistance and a strong dispel that can be cast while you're disabled. So if you're playing against, let's say, Bane, the Bane ults your Nightmare 2, you can cast Unfettered and then follow through. Similar to, let's say, Ursa, except without the Ag Scepter component. They made the magic resistance, status resistance a little bit better. As far as I know, most people were picking the first facet, which gave you a little bit of HP every time you killed a unit. I think that's still going to occur. I think it's not really the magic resistance or status resistance change that made the hero or the Unfettered Facet less desirable. It's just the basis that you really want damage immunity or debuff immunity through your duration of Rage, and having an Unfettered one that just does magic and status resistance is kind of lackluster. You would really just choose this if you're playing against, let's say, a Bane or any hero that would typically go through your Rage. So real short, talking about Lina. For Lina, they just had a bug where one of your 25 talent, level 25 talent as a physical based hero was you would apply 150% crit on targets affected by Dragon Slave. But Dragon Slave used to do a slow burn, but now that's a facet. So if you didn't pick the facet slow burn, that talent was basically meaningless. Well, now the new level 25 talent is 150% crit on targets affected by spells, and those spells are Dragon Slave, Light Strike Array, and Laguna Blade. So they just fixed the bug. That's it. Okay, real quick, pretty straightforward for Lone Druid. There was basically two facets. One where you yourself turn into a bear, and then this one is where the bear turns into a different bear. I don't know how to describe it. From Boo Boo to Yogi Bear, I guess. I don't know. But basically, this was the more risky version where you yourself as Lone Druid are more susceptible to being attacked because you're less tanky, you're playing in range form, etc. However, the value of changing your bear into this souped up bear version is now better Entangling Claw's chance, as well as it occurring more often because of lower cooldown. So Magnus had a facet called reverse polarity. People didn't really understand the appeal of it, but basically it was supposed to be kind of a different way to play the hero, where instead of basically pulling everyone in and then you would do the full combo with everybody else, you would push everyone out, and then you could target one single person that you wanted, or a couple people, and skewer them to your team, or anything in between, or really separate people and displace them from being able to get near one another. They are emphasizing that even more of these changes. Reverse polarity, the effect radius is now 600 to 700. The maximum push distance is from 700 to 850, and then the cooldown is decreased from 120 to 100. And if you want to compare that, it's pretty much just a little bit better than the previous version of reverse polarity, but it's just a better version of reverse polarity as well, where now it's much shorter, does a lot more separation, does a lot more push distance as well. So for Meepo, pretty underrated hero. I think people are going to start seeing him used a lot more, at least soon. As for Mirana, the duration going up from 14 to 18. It's also just I wouldn't consider it a minor change, but it's a change that's now going to be equal to that of Moonlight Shadow. I think they realized that Solar Flare, although nice and really good, especially in team fights and even just generally used, to have it have 4 seconds less than Moonlight Shadow might have been an unnecessary difference. For Morphling, I think honestly most of the changes for Morphling should be revolving around his innate talent. I don't think a lot of people understand just how it works, where it kind of feels negligible, or kind of feels kind of a little bit lackluster. In terms of changes, they made the mana cost a little bit cheaper for waveform, and then now attacks all targets, goes through 50% Morphling's attack damage by default, does not apply on hit effects. This is just so waveform can be a little more pervasive in its values. And then they added the level 20 talent with 50% waveform attack damage and applies on hit effects. Okay, I mean, I'm not really too worried. Or right, Nature's Prophet. I think Nature's Prophet is another hero that just kind of fell to the wayside. Obviously, he's no longer really what he was once meant to be. Obviously, Sprout, they changed it more to a nuking damage that occurs all at once, rather than something where as the longer you stay in there, the more damage you take. I think that changes pretty good for in terms of alternatives if you had to take one. I personally think it just made Nature Prophet fall back into despair and dislike. They changed the Ironwood Treant to be a little more tankier. I think even the Shadow Shaman Hex was better than the current Nature's Prophet Ironwood Treant, which is basically just, instead of multiple Treants, you just summon one big super duper giant Treant. Personally, I just don't think it's all that interesting, but I could be wrong. So now it's just a little bit more damaging, a little more survivable. Overall, just kind of negligible changes. I think people haven't really figured out how to play Nature's Prophet yet. So I think for a lot of these heroes, and for 7.36a, they don't want to create any massive overhauling changes for heroes that might be too strong. What they're trying to do is really just slowly regress some of the free stuff they gave some of these heroes, to the point where it's more balanced. I think Axe is maybe the few heroes that got massive overhaul, a little more scaling, and Crystal Maiden as well, just because the amount of free value and growth and scaling that they got was pretty absurd. For Necrophos here, basically the Sadist innate ability, where Necrophos gains regen for every kill that Necrophos gets, units, so it doesn't have to be heroes. They basically made it so it's a little bit less, in terms of pervasiveness or influence, so to speak. So Sadist also grants Necrophos AoE abilities and items bonus radius per kill. So this is obviously in reference to, let's say, a Radiance or a Heartstopper aura, and if you got the Ag Scepter, it meant you did even more. So to see that change, so it's a little less of a just walk around and let people burn alive effect for Necrophos is nice. The Night Stalker change here, not much to really talk about. I think most people are choosing the obvious facet night regen, or night rain, where you start at night 1, which made it a little bit easier in the laning stage to last hit, and more importantly to harass. And then now they made his base health regen a little bit less, so he's a little more susceptible in the lane despite having great movement speed when he levels Hunter in the Night, which I'm pretty sure is going to be the way to level him. not maxed out by at least 1 or 2 points, especially since you don't need his W all that much in the early game. Crippling Fear, thank you. Other than that, yeah, nothing more to talk about. For Omni Knight, was pretty much killed off the way he was originally played with Phylactery and double Hammer of Purity. Now the current Hammer of Purity and the way Omni Knight is played is forgettable. I don't really think anybody's really thinking about that. They are going to scale up his damage and make the bonus base damage rescaled to be a little bit better in the late game, but not so strong in the early game. That was kind of the way Omni Knight Posture was played. He got basically pretty much won or tried to win his lane, and then from the mid game with an early Phylactery, a blink, and then a shard, he would just snowball off into the late game, and it's pretty much impossible to take him on because he just became too tanky and too difficult to deal with his 1-2 shot build. Now the current Omni Knight again is absolutely negligible in terms of influence, and looks like they want to keep it that way, where his early game is just kind of doable, but his late game is a lot more feasible. At least it's only a minor rescaling, where it's level 1's not that. Level 1's a little weaker, but level 2, 3, and 4 are much stronger, or minorly stronger. So Pangolier is the next hero we're talking about. He's pretty weak. He's actually one of the weakest heroes right now. He's got a pretty terrible win rate. He's got a pretty terrible pick rate for his talents. And Facet, I don't think he really cares about. Double jump, shield crash. It gives you a little more barrier. Okay. Yeah, it does a little more damage. Okay, fine. I mean, it's still pretty piss poor in general. He still plays around his early game timing of Diffusal to get some kills. The double jump just makes it a little bit easier. But overall, I didn't find these changes all that significant compared to his late game, which has been significantly hurt in 7.36. There, 7.36, yes, his intelligence is a little better, so he can spam his abilities a little bit more. They give him a little bit better stats and regen, so his early game's okay. However, I mean, these swashbuckle changes are just brutal. 0 to 0.15 seconds is brutal. The cast range decreasing in the late game is brutal. I mean, it's just so many changes that just really have, I wouldn't say neutered the hero, but has rendered them a lot less effective, especially as the game goes on. So these changes that they're doing for double jump, I don't think it'll revive the hero. Maybe we'll still see him in pro play. I'm not 100% sure, but for now he's a little bit hurt. Yeah, Phantom Assassin, another hero that has been neutered and hurt pretty badly. One of the lowest rated heroes in terms of win rates right now. The methodical chain where coup de grace procs every 6 seconds, every 6 attacks on the same hero or 4 attacks on non-heroes. Sucks. It just sucks. But they made it so Stifling Dagger counts as 2 attacks towards coup de grace, and basically they're trying to lean you back into throwing a couple daggers in and then jumping in with your methodical to guarantee a coup de grace. So it's getting there, but honestly, I still wouldn't play PA if I didn't have to. PUBG changes for fresh meat facet bonus strength per tick reduced from 357 to 135 was, I mean, the original 3 strength increase was insane, especially early game. You were just absolutely devouring everything and everyone. It was wild. As for Flair's hook meat, I think most people are not going to choose this one, to be honest. In general, the fresh meat facet is just too good, especially early levels. Now from 7 to 5, I think it's pretty forgettable, especially considering you probably have a lot of strength at that point. So yeah, Flair's hook distance as damage increased from 30% from 25% at max level. Pretty cool, but I'm not really thinking about that one. I'm really thinking about the fresh meat facet. So this change for tanking, I didn't even know was a thing, but essentially what's happening with Dust Devil is every time you moved with Sandstorm, when he moves or used Burrow Strike, I didn't know it actually got destroyed and then came to him. I thought it always followed him and stayed around wherever he went, but now that's actually officially what it's going to be doing. So nice change. Shadow Shaman is probably one of the best heroes to play, best supports to play. Hate foul play so much. It's so annoying. Anyone who plays Shadow Shaman probably loves it. For a hero that basically has no escape, to see him now effectively have an escape, and more importantly one that's really annoying. On top of that, he can use Cluster Cluck to save an ally. It's really nice. They basically decreased the damage from 75 150 to 280 at max level. Whatever. I guess. I mean, who's picking? Is anyone actually picking up and using shackles for the damage, or are they using it purely to hold someone down so their teammates can follow through? That's my honest opinion. Maybe I'm underestimating shackles. For the foul play, the cooldown increased from 90 seconds to 120 seconds is a welcome change. I think foul play is insanely strong. I hate that ability so freaking much. Oh, so Slark is another hero that I also think people are, I wouldn't say are overlooking, but are not really that scared of him as much as some other heroes. To see Slark get a little bit more movement increase in the early game and health gain from 8 to 10 in the early game just shows that Barracuda was not as persuasive to get people to playing Slark again, especially during his laning stage, where a lot of offlanes are just particularly very strong and very annoying. Now that they gave him a little better regen, or health gain rather, is a nice touch, but I still don't think Slark's going to be played all that much yet. Maybe I'm underestimating it. The Snapfire change is just to make her early game a little bit better if she decides to go more of a physical core build, but I don't think that's much to say about that. As for Spectre, it is a slight change on the hero for Forsaken, where Desolate can deal partial damage to enemies and is applied by Spectral Dagger. Basically, Desolate damage when non-hero units are nearby increased from 40 to 50%. I think just because you're usually ganking with your ultimate ability, Shadow Step, and then when you threw out the dagger, the Desolate damage was not that significant, especially in the early levels. I think mostly you get maybe 1 point in Desolate and you max out Dispersion first, I think, if I remember. So to have it do a little bit more damage from the get-go on is a nice change. Yeah, for Storm Spirit, I mean, his laning stage was pretty good if you actually look at Static Slide, which means you could send Static Remnants out, and it would do pretty good in harassing or guaranteeing the hit on enemy range creeps, or at least help set that up. Also helped even stack jungle camps if you could actually, if you actually had the mana to pull it off. They reduced your mana regen from 0.6 to 0.2, which means that your laning stage is a little bit harder. And I would actually say that's because Galvanized from like 6 on is just brutal. It's just really, really strong. Definitely gives Storm Spirit that snowball effect that he likes to see from those old Bloodstone days. So pretty nice change for anyone who doesn't like Storm Spirit, including me. Yeah, Sven is probably another really weak hero, similar to PA. This bonus damage increased from 100, 140, 180 to 110, 150, 190. Doesn't really change much for the hero. I think the hero overall is just relatively weak. He did even receive, I mean, he did receive changes 7.36. I'm surprised it's not listed here, but yes, they gave him a little more base strength. They didn't really remark the fact, again, still that Great Cleave no longer gives strength. You can see here, it just doesn't say anywhere that, see here, Great Cleave used to give strength. Now it's just gone. So they gave him more base strength to help him with last hitting, but because nobody's been informed that Great Cleave no longer gives strength, he's just been shit. So the Techie's health regen change, I'll break it down really simple for you. They reduced his attack range, so now he's more susceptible to taking damage. So now they give him a bit of health regen to compensate. For Templar Assassin is actually one of the best heroes to play. It's actually #1 right next to Legion Commander. And I'll tell you the reasons why. Really simple. One is that Refractor basically made it so if you took any damage while your refraction is on, those shield barriers would then change into damage barriers. So instead of 5 health, 5 shield barrier instance and 5 damage instances, or 5 damage instances, right? It would become, those 5 health barriers would then eventually become 5 more damage instances, so you would have 10 ultimately. On top of that, they changed the refraction, where instead of refraction just popping anytime you took any level of damage, now you need to take a certain level of damage for that instance to pop. So most creeps in terms of damage, and I think they're like 18 or something lower than that. So it would take several hits from creeps or from, let's say, a plague ward to actually pop your shield barrier. That's a nice change. 21, excuse me. So yeah, if you took damage basically from refraction, yeah, it used to be 30 here. See, so your level 1 refraction was 30. So if a creep hit you, it basically would not pop. It need 2 hits to go through. So you basically were able to take a couple hits without your refraction shield breaking down, and that means you could block an enemy's attack at least for a partial amount. Now they made it 20, so if creeps hit you, well, unfortunately, you're going to lose that shield from refraction. Side blades as well, they reduced the range significantly. It used to, basically when you played TA, you used to just max out meld, you used to max out refraction, and you would get no points in side blade because you just didn't need it. Well, now they made it so if you don't get any points in side blades, it hurts. It definitely, your range is definitely poor from 550 to 350. I still honestly think people are not going to get any levels in side blades, and that's because the spill amount is 80%, regardless whether you get any levels of side blades or not, because you start with an innate ability of side blades. And so just being able to survive the laning stages with refraction and meld, and then just relying on the side blades inherent spill amount means that you can just build Dragonlance to help compensate for its lack of range, and then you can build Desolator, and then you just farm stack junk camps very early in the game, and that means you come online much earlier. So they're just making the laning stage a little bit harder for you, and they're hoping that will either incentivize you to get at least 1 point in side blades, or more importantly, that you'll be more punished as Temple Assassin, and her win rate will hopefully go down. Yeah, I don't know what they're doing with Terrorblade. They're trying to make it so nobody wants to play this hero, basically, because if you conjure an image, it always spawns at full health but has an additional health cost. But the thing is that with Soul Fragment, it also still costs mana. So it costs mana and health to summon illusions at full health. Why on earth would I pick that? So one of the great murders of this patch was Tinker. Tinker, nobody really wants to play him. He's actually got the lowest win rate and the lowest pick rate at the current time. Just because they try to move him away from his spammable, annoying abilities and more into, I guess, more of a team oriented, or at least a support version of Tinker. I don't know how to interpret it, to be honest, and we can see the changes are more aligned with what they're trying to go for, just a little bit stronger. So one, Translocator, which is the facet. When a self-defense matrix barrier on Tinker is fully absorbed, he blinks in a random forward direction. I don't know why they made it I guess they made it a forward direction so you're always turned around, trying to run away as you lose your shield barrier, so you'll go backwards. But I mean, moving forward is also pretty brutal. So now it applies a strong dispel to Tinker before blinking. That's just to further create an escape for him. The blink random direction angle reduced from 120 to 90 degrees. Okay, and then the blink distance increased from 300 to 350. So they're just trying to make Translocator blink effect after the barrier is popped a little more potent and escape ability for a hero that typically can't escape if caught out. The Eureka, which is his innate ability here. Tinker gains 1% item cooldown reduction per 3 intelligence up to a maximum of 60%. They reduced that from 4 to 3, so they really don't want it to be too pervasive of a innate ability. And then the March of Machines, they just made it a little bit easier in mana cost, just because you can't spam Soul Ring Rearm anymore. However, the damage is also better, so it makes farming a little bit easier when you max it out. And I believe most of the time you should be maxing it out next to Laser, if I remember. Key Inconvenience, the channel time has been decreased from 4 to 3 seconds to just straight up 3 seconds. And then I see they didn't really change the talent, so it goes from 3 seconds to 2.5 seconds right from the get-go if you get at level 20. So pretty much Key Inconvenience is just a nice reduction, a little bit easier to do. As for Warp Flare, mana cost decreased from 180. A lot of people are using Warp Flare. It's actually a pretty cool ability. I like it a lot. However, it is kind of a distance to build that, especially on a hero that, yes, farms well, but doesn't farm as efficiently as before. I think most people are just not playing Tinker whatsoever, quite frankly. So I think they'll need more data to see how good this hero could be, so to speak. Moving on here, let's see, the rearm cost reduced from 125 to maximum 200 at level 3. Again, this is just a hero that it just doesn't do that great in terms of mana. It really needs mana items, as opposed to before it was just bottle Soul Ring and just spam rearm. Now that everything costs mana and you can't just have a free rearm all the time, a little bit harder to play this hero. So the changes here for Tiny are pretty straightforward, honestly. The mana cost increase for Tiny has been gone up a little bit. This is just because Tiny It's usually maxing out Avalanche, so they're just making it a little more punishing. Especially this new pause 1 Tiny you're playing, not really pause 2 anymore, where basically his new insurmountable um, facet, where basically your strength helps you gain a lot of slow and status resistance. Tiny has one of the weakest strength growth in the game, but he has a great base strength. So that just means you build items that help you get a little more strength. So if I go Treads, which is a popular item on pause 1, Sanjiasha, Echo Saber, you can go Silver Edge if you want. And then Black King Bar means you get a lot more strength overall, right? If we pick ourselves up to, let's say, level 20, which is pretty much the late game for Tiny, you can see your strength is pretty decent, and that means your yeah, even the talent, level 10 strength, it means that you have pretty good status and slow resistance, right? 37% status resistance and slow resistance is 50%. You can see they changed that insurmountable, where your strength to slow resistance is reduced from 25 to 20%. Still pretty good in general. So they made Tiny a little bit less formidable as an opponent, especially due to an insurmountable build change. But however, when he man fights people, his craggy exterior is still pretty strong, right? It's 10 stacks, 5% per stack, so up to 50% you could have your attack damage lowered every time you fight Tiny. So really cool change. So let's talk about Visage. Visage is basically has 2 facets. One is Visage, and the other one is one with training wheels, basically the faithful followers. Familiars, let's see now, Visage familiars now preserve their storm form alt cast mode when resummoned. Okay, that's just a small convenient change, UX change. Ability on Visage can now be casted even if Visage is silenced or stunned. Will now have an effective familiars as silenced or stunned. Okay, so basically you were not able to use the stone form while you were using Visage because he was silenced, and this was basically just a bug, right? If you have familiars, you should be able to silence. You should be able to use the stone form on them, regardless if Visage himself is silenced. On self and familiars have now immediate cast behavior by default, can be put in alt cast mode to become point targeted. Okay, so if I point target this, then you can just use, because some people didn't like this new cast range version. They liked being able to just spam D and just control your familiars as they are. So just user experience changes. Not much to say about Void Spirit, just another hero that isn't that popular. And honestly, I think he's still pretty forgotten. For Warlock, the Eldritch Summoning, imp explosions reduced from 25 to 75, 125 to 205 at the final level. In terms of changes, it's fine. If you want to know what the Eldritch change is, basically it's the fact that whenever an enemy unit dies while afflicted by one or more Warlock's abilities, a minor imp is summoned that lasts for 15 seconds and explodes on death. So it's similar to the Fatal Bonds and then the Upheaval when you got the Shard. Now it's just a little bit weaker because any ability that is affected by Warlock is now summoning, or any unit I should say, is now summoning an imp on death, which is pretty brutal. So Winter Wyvern is the next one to be changed here. They changed Dragon Sight. They made it so that your early game damage per attack is rescaled from 0.25 instead of 0.4. I guess it was just too long of a range early in the game. I actually never noticed. Most people I know, as well as myself, play Essence of the Blue Heart just because it's much strong. I guess it's just much better in my opinion. Most people are playing Wyvern as a support anyway, and this Essence of the Blue Heart, especially with Cold Embrace at level 2, or if you pick up Holy Locket, just made it so that your mana was pretty much replenished every single time, or relatively quickly at least. One other change they've changed here was Splinter Blast. The projectile speed is much faster now, so it's easier to land, and on top of that, it can be cast on allies, which means it can hit a lot of one more enemy than usual, and so they made the damage a little bit less just because you're doing typically a lot more, or more in general. So last hero that I want to talk about, well, I want to talk about 2 heroes. One is Zeus needs a nerf. I don't know why they overlooked this guy. This guy is top 10 best heroes to play this patch. He was one of the top 10 mid laners to play last patch, so kind of surprised that Livewire hasn't received a slight change, just because it's much easier to last hit and harass with Zeus. It's much easier to use lightning hands and attack and take down creeps very quickly, especially when you get the Manta style, which also gets the Livewire bonus with static field. So A little surprised about that, but fine. Let's talk about the actual last hero of the patch, Wraith King. Wraith King, they made his Aghanim Spirit Wraith duration a little bit shorter, basically 1 second less at the final level. That's understandable completely. Most Wraith Kings, they don't really get Axe Scepter until very late, or Postries maybe get it a little bit earlier. The other thing they changed here is that Cursed Blade, as well as the Spectral Blade. That's just another change that I thought was, I guess Cursed Blade was the original wording for that. I don't know. Oh no, excuse me, Cursed Blade. It basically when you play Wraith King, okay, when you attack with Spectral Blade, it basically does a second hit delayed called the Cursed Blade, which is the Cursed Blade effect. And basically it was kind of like a delayed Echo Saber where you hit once and then after a few seconds it would then do the damage. It was actually pretty strong, especially when you have this innate talent where if you die, then the hero comes back and can then land you another Spectral Blade / Cursed Blade, which was also on crit when you get Mortal Strike. So it's actually pretty brutal. To see that they nerfed it means that it's a little less scary to be chased by a Wraith form of Wraith King. But I think Spectral Blade's actually really strong for the hero, and I'm pretty glad to see it nerfed. I don't play a lot of Wraith King, but I'm sure Wraith King players are upset. All right, that's it for me. Very early in the day, so I apologize if I sound very tired. This is patch 7.36a. Guides are coming. They need to be updated now again for this one. So I was hoping to start it today, but I might need a bit more data before I can do it. Check me out on Twitch. If you like these videos, please share them. I definitely need the support. Cheers.